What if I told you that the most terrifying moment in galactic history wasn't when the war fleets arrived, but when someone actually answered our desperate call for help? My name is Cale Thorne, and I'm about to tell you about the day we learned that salvation can be more frightening than extinction itself. This is the story of how humanity reminded the galaxy that debts are always paid, one way or another. I'll never forget the precise moment I understood that no one was coming to rescue us. I stood alone before the crystalline observation panels of the Supreme Council of Baal-Rashan, watching as the pale blue glow of dawn filtered through the translucent spires of Lysara Central. That's when our detection systems confirmed what we'd been dreading. The Corvan Armada continued its relentless advance, maintaining course, ignoring all transmissions, simply growing larger on our screens. 19 warship. The number hung suspended in the air, projected by the central holographic display, motionless and heavy, as if it wanted to crush us through sheer presence alone. I felt a tightness in my chest, a dull ache that had nothing to do with physical pain. Breathe, Cale Thorne, I whispered to myself. You're the Council's primary liaison. If you break, everyone breaks. But despite my internal commands, my fingers trembled against my will. Behind me stood Shakran, supreme strategist of our defensive forces. I knew it was him by the silence. He only maintained such profound quiet when he'd exhausted every possible simulation, and they all ended the same way. 2 stellar cycles, he finally said, his voice flat. Perhaps less. 2 cycles. It wasn't time. It was mockery. We couldn't evacuate the outer moons in that span, let alone convince anyone to help us. The Galactic Assembly had already delivered their verdict. Jurisdictional dispute, polished words concealing raw fear. The Elthari were conveniently absent. The Mirani declared neutrality. The Centali expressed their deepest regret. We'd built our entire civilization on the certainty that reason always precedes violence. 3,000 rotations believing that knowledge was sufficient, that diplomacy served as adequate shielding. How naive we'd been. The communications technician interrupted the session, his bioluminescent gill slits pulsing nervously. Liaison Thorne, we have a response to the distress beacon. I didn't turn immediately. I expected another refusal, another hollow formula. Origin? I asked. He hesitated, and that tiny detail chilled my blood. Sol system, he replied. They identify themselves as humans from the planet Earth. The name meant nothing to anyone in the chamber. Several council members exchanged confused glances, accessed their archives. Recent classification, someone murmured. Category 12 world. A death world. What are they requesting? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Information about our situation, the technician responded. Their captain's name is Alessandro Rivera. He requests permission to send a vessel. Just one. One ship, I thought. Against 1900. The murmurs erupted immediately. Social alarms, not tactical ones. Distrust, fear of the unknown. Shakran stepped forward, his dorsal crests rigid. We know nothing about this species. They could be predators, worse than the Corvans. I looked at him, not with hardness but with exhaustion. Worse than total annihilation? He didn't respond. Outside, the city began to transform. Traffic flows accelerated erratically. The lights abandoned their usual rhythms. Fear always finds pathways before logic does. When I authorized the visit, I did so without heroic conviction. It was a cold calculation, a desperate wager. Allow them to come, I ordered, and inform them of our environmental conditions. The confirmation arrived within minutes. The human vessel would arrive in 18 hours. I felt something different then, not relief, not hope, unease. It was impossible. No known ship could traverse that distance without leaving quantum signatures. Our sensors showed nothing. Hours later, spatial alarms activated throughout the system. Object entering the system, the technician announced, his voice tight. Velocity incompatible with any registered design. The hull was metallic, crude, without ornamentation. It advanced directly, as if space weren't a hostile medium but merely a simple obstacle. I observed the stellar void with an uncomfortable certainty growing inside me. I didn't know if these humans were coming to save us, but I knew something with absolute clarity. They didn't fear the same universe that was about to destroy us. The ship appeared like a wound in the firmament. It didn't emerge with elegance, didn't request permission from space, it simply existed there, forcing reality to accept it. Our sensors screamed contradictory data, as if they didn't know what language to use to describe what they were witnessing. Velocity reducing, the technician announced, his voice too high. Structural integrity. Impossible. It should have disintegrated several centuries ago. But it hadn't. The metallic hull reflected Lasara Central's light in a raw manner, without the diffusion fields used by civilized species. There were no harmonic curves, no aesthetic consideration, only layers, plates, functional angles. A ship built to survive impacts, I thought, not to avoid them. Confirm identification, I requested. Affirmative. Signal matches the distress response. Human vessel. Registry UEF Resolute. The name produced an uncomfortable feeling I couldn't explain. It wasn't poetic. It didn't evoke stars or elevated concept. It was a declaration. Resolute. They're requesting permission to descend, the technician added. Captain Alessandro Rivera commanding. I glanced at Chakran. His dorsal crests were tense, an unmistakable sign of alert. I don't like this, he murmured. They come alone. That's not prudence, it's arrogance or absolute confidence. And if it's the second, I thought without saying it aloud. I authorized the descent. The vessel pierced our atmosphere without escort, without ceremonies. It descended like a projectile that learned to brake at the last possible second. The landing platforms automatically adjusted containment fields, as if they too distrusted what was arriving. When the hull touched ground, there were no cheers, no relief, only silence. The group waiting was small. We didn't want to provoke or intimidate. I stood at the front, followed by Chakran and two tactical liaisons. When the airlock opened, the sound was mechanical, brutal, like a beast drawing breath. The first to descend was the human captain, smaller than I'd expected but denser somehow. He moved as if gravity were an old acquaintance, not a variable requiring consideration. His eyes scanned the environment rapidly, not with wonder. That disturbed me more than any hostile gesture would have. Captain Alessandro Rivera, he said, bringing one hand to his chest in a gesture I would later learn to recognize. We appreciate the landing permission. His voice was firm but not defiant, like someone accustomed to speaking in places where words carry weight. Cale Thorne, liaison of the Supreme Council of Baal-Rashan, I responded. You arrived quickly. A shadow of something, perhaps irony, crossed his face. We did what we could. He doesn't deny the impossibility, I thought. Behind him descended other humans, 6 in total. They wore functional reinforced suit. None carried visible weapons, and yet everything about them screamed preparation. Chakran stepped forward. Your world is classified as lethal, he said bluntly. High gravity, toxic atmosphere, hostile life. How did you develop interstellar travel? Alessandro Rivera looked at me for a second longer than necessary before responding. I suppose because we had no alternative. He didn't elaborate. Interesting, I thought. They don't justify themselves. They don't boast. They state facts. We led them to the command center. During the journey, I noticed how they observed our architecture, our suspended avenues, our bioluminescent gardens. Not with desire, not with envy, but with evaluation. In the tactical chamber, I projected the system hologram. The Corvan fleet advanced like a dark tide. 19 energy signatures. The silence became thick. That's the problem, I said finally. Alessandro approached the hologram. He didn't ask permission, didn't invade, simply assumed he needed to be there. Dense formation, he commented. Linear, no deception screens. Shakran frowned, his crests twitching. It's their doctrine. They overwhelm, they intimidate. It works. Of course, Alessandro responded. Against people who don't shoot back. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Our shields will hold for 6 hours, I interjected. Perhaps less. Alessandro nodded slowly, then instead of responding, he turned toward me. Liaison Thorn, I'll be direct. My ship can't stop that, but I didn't come purely out of curiosity. He activated his communicator. Colonel Maria Salazar, are you receiving? A voice responded almost immediately. Always, Captain. Initiate open call protocol. Maximum priority. Shakran took a step back. He's requesting reinforcements. Alessandro raised his gaze toward him. I'm informing them that we found people who don't deserve to die alone. That phrase, I thought, isn't diplomatic. It's dangerous. The hologram changed. New signatures appeared at the system's edge. 1, then 5, then 12. They didn't emerge from visible tunnels, they simply arrived. Human vessels, large, heavy, metallic, constructed like mobile fortresses. I felt something I hadn't felt since my first rotation as liaison. Not hope. Respect. Cale Thorn, Shakran murmured. What have we just invited into our sky? I observed the human ships taking positions with precision that bordered on disturbing. I don't know, I responded, but I think the Corvins made a mistake. And mistakes, when humans are involved, tend to be collected with interest. There were no announcements, no heroic speeches. The human vessels simply occupied space. One after another they emerged in silence, aligning themselves around Lasara Central with a discipline that didn't depend on visible signals. There was no chaos, no delayed adjustments. Each unit seemed to know exactly where it should be, as if the battle had already occurred and this was merely the repetition. That, I thought, isn't improvisation. It's memory. Defensive formation complete in 3 minutes, one of my technicians reported, astonished. They're creating exclusion zones, multiple layers. Shakran leaned toward the hologram. That's not a wall, he whispered. It's a trap. Captain Alessandro Rivera didn't smile. He didn't appear nervous either. He observed the data with a calm I found offensive until I understood it wasn't contempt, it was concentration. How many ships have arrived? I asked. 14, he responded. For now. For now. Our sensors indicate kinetic armament, an analyst interjected. Solid projectiles, missiles, even fission warheads. Several council members instinctively retreated. For us, such weaponry was archaic, savage, inefficient against modern energy shields. Alessandro barely turned his head. Your shields are calibrated for energy dispersion, correct? I nodded. Like those of every civilized species. Then they're not calibrated for this. He didn't say it with arrogance. He said it like someone pointing out a structural flaw in a bridge. Captain, I said, the Corvins have conquered 18 systems. They've never been defeated. They've never encountered someone willing to lose ships to win wars, he responded. There was the fundamental difference. A pulse ran through the chamber. The Corvin signatures had just exited hyperspace displacement. Space darkened with their angular hulls, the same intimidating formation that had subjugated entire worlds without firing a single shot. The hologram marked an open channel. The face of Draxos, Corvin warlord, appeared projected. Multiple eyes, tensed mandibles, absolute certainty radiating from him. Inhabitants of Baal Rishon, his voice thundered. This is your final opportunity. Surrender. Dismantle your defenses. Preserve the useful ones. He didn't mention the humans. That detail caught my attention. Alessandro stepped forward. This is Captain Alessandro Rivera, United Earth Fleet. Withdraw from this system. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Draxos tilted his head slowly. Primitives, he said finally. You've been hired as mercenaries? No, Alessandro responded. We came because they asked for help. The warlord emitted a sound our translators identified as laughter. Exposed metal, no worthy shields, physical projectiles. This will be brief. The channel closed. Shakran looked at me. Now we'll understand if humans are brave or suicidal. General, Alessandro said without looking away from the hologram. What's the effective range of your orbital batteries? Maximum range, Shakran responded. Sustained energy fire. Good, Alessandro nodded. Don't fire first. I looked at him, surprised. No, let them advance. I don't know if I felt fear or disbelief. The fleets approached each other. The Corvins maintained their pattern, straight, confident, convinced that no one was foolish enough to confront them head-on. Critical distance in 30 seconds, a human technician announced through the internal channel. Alessandro activated a signal that resonated across all human vessels. Phase 1. Now. Space filled with contrails. They weren't energy beams, they were objects. Metal accelerated to absurd velocities, multi-stage missiles, projectiles that didn't glow until impact. The Corvin shields reacted as always, they expanded, absorbed energy, and failed. The first enemy vessels opened as if something invisible had pierced them. They didn't explode immediately. They depressurized, split apart, died in silence. What? I managed to say. Physics doesn't negotiate, Alessandro responded. Chaos erupted. The Corvins attempted to regroup, but their doctrine didn't contemplate an enemy that closed distance under fire. The human ships advanced, they didn't dodge, they endured. I watched one of them lose external plates, catch fire, and continue forward. They keep advancing, I thought with horror. Phase 2, Alessandro ordered. Human fighters deployed like coordinated swarms. They didn't fly alone, they flew in pairs, trios, living patterns. They covered each other, sacrificed for one another when necessary. A pilot shouted through the channel. Contact at 6. Received. I've got you covered. 2 Corvin signatures disappeared from the hologram. On the surface, our sensors detected enemy transports diverting. They were attempting to land. Permission to activate ground defenses, Shakran requested. Alessandro nodded. They're already ready. When? I thought. When did they prepare them? The first transports were shot down before touching ground. The few that managed to land found fortified positions, crossfire, calculated retreat. The humans had planned for an invasion that wasn't theirs. Draxos's face reappeared, distorted by interference. This is impossible, he roared. No one fights like this. Alessandro approached the channel. No one who wants to conquer. We fight so they don't return. Silence. Then a Corvin order crossed the spectrum. Retreat. Enemy signatures began to extinguish. In the chamber, no one celebrated, no one shouted. I leaned against the console, feeling something inside me had broken and rebuilt simultaneously. Kale Thorn, Shakran said quietly. Today the sky ceased to belong to us. I watched the human vessels escorting the Corvin remnants out of the system. I didn't respond. Today we learned it never belonged to us. The Corvin retreat felt like victory, it felt like a sudden void, pressure that disappears leaving the body uncertain how to breathe again. The alarms silenced one by one. The holograms stopped flashing red. Space, for the first time in cycles, seemed expansive again, too expansive. Confirming, a technician said. Enemy signatures abandoning the system. No active pursuit. I looked at Alessandro Rivera. Why don't you destroy them now? He didn't respond immediately. He observed the escape trajectories, calculating something I couldn't see. Because they're defeated, he said finally. And because someone has to return home to tell what happened. That's not mercy, I thought. It's strategy. Shakran frowned, his crests twitching. They'll return with more ships. Probably, Alessandro nodded. But not the same way. The chamber began filling with sounds we'd contained for hours. Deep breaths, long exhalations, incredulous murmurs. Some liaisons leaned against consoles as if the floor had suddenly decided to become unstable. I felt exhaustion, ancient exhaustion, as if an entire era had ended in a single rotation. "They're requesting authorization to descend," an assistant announced. "Human Commander Lucia Herrera wants to coordinate damage assessment on the surface." I nodded without thinking. "Let her descend." Alessandro turned toward me. "Liaison Thorne, we need a formal meeting with your council. What happened today doesn't stay in today." I don't know if the combat scared me more or that phrase. Hours later, I walked through the city, not as an ambassador but as a witness. The towers still stood. The bioluminescent gardens still breathed light, but something had changed. People looked at the sky with a new mixture in their eyes. It was no longer just fear, it was awareness. In a plaza, I saw a group of humans working alongside Baalrashan engineers. They were repairing an energy node damaged by shield overload. No one spoke much. They understood each other with gestures, with brief signals, with efficient silences. I didn't know if it calmed or disturbed me. "I never thought I'd see this," Shakran said beside me. "Armed foreigners walking through our capital without causing panic." "They don't walk like conquerors," I responded. "They walk like exhausted guardians." The general looked at me sideways. "Don't idealize them. What they do is violence, efficient and brutal." "I know," I said. "And yet here we are." The council meeting was tense. The humans didn't demand. They didn't threaten. They presented data, projections, scenarios. They showed combat recordings from angles we hadn't registered. Corvin errors. Human decisions that involved deliberate losses. "Here," Lucia Herrera pointed, "we lost this ship to force the enemy turn. We knew they'd fall into the trap." A council member looked away. "You sacrificed a ship. On purpose." Lucia didn't lower her voice. "We sacrificed one ship to save a planet." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Honest. Alessandro took the floor. "We're not asking you to become us. We're telling you that from today forward, you're no longer alone. But that has a cost." "What cost?" I asked. He held my gaze. "The galaxy now knows you exist and knows you're worth defending." "That makes you a larger target," Shakran said. "Yes," Alessandro responded, "but also a point of resistance." One of the council elders spoke then, his voice trembling. "Our civilization was born from the rejection of war. What happens when war finds us anyway?" Alessandro didn't respond. It was Lucia. "Then you decide if you prefer to die faithful to an idea or live to redefine it." That phrase pierced me. That night I didn't sleep. I watched the sky from my quarters, observing the human silhouettes patrolling in orbit, ships that didn't seem part of the landscape but now sustained it. I didn't know if I was grateful or uneasy. I remembered Draxos, his surprise, his final fear. I remembered how the humans didn't celebrate, didn't shout victory, they just continued. How many times have they done this? At dawn, Alessandro requested a private audience. "It won't be the last fleet," he said bluntly. "The Corvins will test boundaries. Other empires will observe." "And Earth?" I asked. "Why get involved?" He was silent a second longer than usual. "Because once, long ago, no one came to help us." He didn't explain further. I didn't insist. "Cale Thorne," he continued, "if you accept, we'll establish permanent presence, joint defense, technological exchange. And if we don't accept? Then we'll leave," he said. "But we'll return if you call, though perhaps it will be too late." I looked at the horizon. "I don't know if our people are ready to live with soldiers among us." Alessandro nodded. "No one is. We weren't either the first time." There I understood the real price. It wasn't technology, it wasn't protection, it was accepting that peace without strength is just a pause between two attacks. "I'll convene the council," I said finally. Alessandro stood. Whatever your decision, liaison, you did the right thing asking for help. I watched him leave and felt a bitter certainty settle in me. We had survived, but we were no longer the same. And somewhere in the galaxy, someone was learning to fear a planet called Earth. The council took 12 hours to decide. 12 hours of circular discussions, uncomfortable silences, and gazes that avoided the sky. 12 hours in which I understood something essential. We weren't debating a military alliance, we were debating who we were going to be from now on. If we accept, one of the elders said, we'll never again be a purely peaceful civilization. If we don't accept, Shakran responded, we may not be a civilization at all. I listened without intervening, not because I had no opinion, but because I knew deep down everyone already knew the answer. The debate wasn't about what to do, it was about how to live with it. When I finally stood, silence fell like a containment field. The humans didn't come to conquer us, I said. They came when no one else did. Not because we owed them something, but because they chose to do so. I looked at each one. The galaxy already sees us differently. Rejecting this reality won't make it disappear. The vote was brief. Unanimous. We accepted. The human response wasn't euphoria, it was logistics. Alessandro Rivera returned with Lucia Herrera and other officers. They didn't celebrate, they nodded, they activated protocols. Joint base in high orbit, Lucia explained. Won't interfere with your civilian traffic. Defensive, transparent. Cross-training, Alessandro added. No one will force you to take up arms, but you'll understand how war works in case it finds you again. In case, I thought, not when. The work began immediately. I watched human vessels anchor modules to our crystalline shipyards, dark metal beside living light. Two philosophies joined by force. The Baal Rashan engineers observed with fascination the brutal human efficiency. The humans, in turn, studied our technology with almost reverential respect. We've never seen generators like this, admitted an engineer named Diego Morales. They're elegant. The Baal Rashan beside him responded with timidity. We've never seen armor designed to fail and keep functioning. Both laughed uncomfortably. That's how alliances begin, I thought. Not with treaties. With awkward conversations. The training was more difficult. The first Baal Rashan volunteers weren't prepared for human doctrine. Simulations with forced retreats, scenarios without clean solutions, decisions where someone always died. I watched one abandon the simulator, trembling. This isn't defense, he said. It's sacrifice calculus. Lucia didn't deny it. War doesn't ask what you want to lose, it asks what you're willing to pay. I didn't know if that made us stronger or simply more aware. The news spread fast, too fast. Messages from other systems began arriving. Questions disguised as courtesy, veiled petitions, fear. The world of Baal Rashan resists. The Corvins retreated. A species from a death world intervened. The Galactic Assembly convened an extraordinary session. This time they didn't ignore us, they observed us. I was present remotely, the humans too. The human presence alters the balance, an Elthery delegate said. A species with such destructive capacity must be contained. Alessandro tilted his head slightly. We didn't come to alter the balance. We came because someone was about to disappear. Today it was the Corvins, another intervened. Tomorrow it could be you deciding who lives. Alessandro held the gaze. The difference is we don't decide alone. I don't know if he convinced them. I know he disturbed them. Weeks later, we received the confirmed report. The Corvins were regrouping. Not to attack immediately, to study, to learn. Don't underestimate that, Shakran warned. An enemy that survives learns. Alessandro nodded. That's why we're not leaving. That night I observed the joint base from the surface. It was a new silhouette in our sky. Strange, heavy, necessary. Do you regret it? Shakran asked me. I thought about the previous cycles, about the tranquility we believed eternal, about the comfortable ignorance. I didn't respond, I said, But I'm not at peace either. The general emitted a low sound, almost a bitter laugh. Then we're prepared. I don't know when it started, I thought. But at some point we stopped asking to be left in peace and started preparing to defend it. And that, I knew then, would change Baal Rashan forever. The first signal didn't come from the Corvins, it came from a distant system, one that barely figured in our strategic map. A peripheral world, poor in resources, irrelevant to empires until that day. Incoming message, the analyst announced. Ancient encoding, doesn't belong to any known power. I projected it onto the hologram. The image was unstable. A reduced alien council. Tense faces. Deteriorated architecture. I recognized the pattern immediately. A civilization that had waited too long before asking for help. We are the Esnari, their spokesperson said. Cycles ago, when our primary moon collapsed, it was a human ship that evacuated our children. They asked nothing in return. She paused. Today, the Corvin Empire has located us. The silence in the chamber was dense. So the story was repeating. We have no fleet, she continued. We have no allies, only memory. We know what the humans did here. We know you fought alongside them. She looked at me. We're not asking you to save us, only that you remember. The message ended. Shakran was the first to speak. This is a strategic error. If we respond to every call, we become a beacon. Alessandro Rivera didn't respond immediately. He walked toward the deactivated hologram. He placed his hand on the console. Cale Thorne, he said finally. May I speak frankly? I nodded. When my species went to space, he continued, no one took us seriously. We were new, uncomfortable, violent by their standards. He paused. But there was a moment when someone helped us. Not an empire. A minor colony. They gave us fuel when we were stranded. They lost contracts because of it. And what happened to them? I asked. Years later, someone attacked them. He looked at me. We went. There I understood the pattern. It's not altruism, he added. It's memory. The council convened urgently. If we intervene, a counselor said, the assembly will accuse us of expansive militarization. If we don't intervene, I responded, we become what we feared. Spectators. Shakran closed his eyes for a second. Sending human forces from Baal Rashan exposes us. Alessandro shook his head slowly. Not from here. He activated a stellar map. Earth is closer. Earth. That name had gone from being a footnote to an axis. Will they respond? I asked. Alessandro activated the channel. Admiral Sofia Andrade, Priority 1. The response was immediate. I'm listening, Alessandro. The Esnari are in danger. Corvins confirmed. Silence. Brief. Decisive. What do you need? Time, he responded. And for someone to remember why we helped the first time. Understood, the Admiral said. Dispatching response fleet. Not from Baal Rashan. From home. The channel closed. No one applauded. I didn't know if I felt pride or vertigo. Days later, the news arrived. The human fleet intercepted the Corvins before they reached the Esnari world. There was no grand battle, no demonstration, only an overwhelming presence and a clear message. This system is under human observation. The Corvins retreated again. The Galactic Assembly reacted with contained panic. Meetings, commissions, words like balance, containment, red lines. I observed from Baal Rashan with a growing certainty inside me. It's not the force that frightens them, Shakran said. They attack to fulfill promises. And that, I responded, is unpredictable for the galaxy. Alessandro approached the observation window. Cale Thorne, do you realize what's happening? Yes, I said. The galaxy is learning something new. What? That Earth doesn't forget favors. We remained silent, observing the stars. I thought about the Esnari, about the evacuated children, about how a small decision had generated a chain impossible to stop. I don't know if humanity realized when it started, but from that moment, helping Earth wasn't just a moral option, it was a long-term investment. And somewhere, very far away, other worlds were beginning to wonder if they'd treated humans well when they still had the chance. It wasn't an official announcement that changed the galaxy's course, it was a silence. For entire cycles, diplomatic channels remained strangely cautious. Empires that once spoke with condescension now measured every word. Minor powers left incomplete messages, testing the ground, like someone checking if ice still holds. Earth didn't proclaim anything, didn't issue doctrines, didn't raise banners, it simply responded when called. New incoming message, the analyst informed. Origin, Tailcore. Shakran frowned, his crests twitching. They're traitors. They never involve themselves in conflicts. The image showed a single aged representative with stress marks on his leathery skin. Years ago, he said, a human delegation protected one of our convoys without charging escort fees. Today a Corvan faction demands tribute or destruction. He didn't ask for help directly, he only narrated. Alessandro listened in silence. When the message ended, there was no discussion. Transmit to Tailcore, he ordered. Fleet en route. Preventive. From Baal Rashan? I asked. No, he responded. From Earth. Again. Shakran exhaled slowly. They're building something no empire has achieved. What? I asked. Trust, he responded, and fear at the same time. The Galactic Assembly could no longer ignore it. They convened an expanded session. This time they demanded physical human presence. Alessandro went, I accompanied him. The chamber was enormous, circular, designed so no one seemed dominant. Still, I noticed how gazes converged on the humans upon entering. They carried no visible weapons, no imperial symbols, only functional worn uniforms. Human expansion is cause for concern, a Centali delegate began. Your species intervenes without mandate. Alessandro didn't raise his voice. We intervene when someone who helped us is in danger. That creates dangerous precedents, another replied. The galaxy cannot sustain a network of armed debts. Lucia Herrera intervened. Then the galaxy already lives on debts, only until now no one was collecting them. The murmur was immediate. Are you declaring a policy of selective protection? I asked aloud. Alessandro looked at me. No, we're declaring memory. That word fell again like a kinetic impact. Then what happens if someone harms a human ally? An Elthri asked. Alessandro held her gaze. Then they learn that Earth doesn't forget. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement. Upon returning to Baal Rashan, I understood the true change. Trade routes nearby had become more active, not for resources, for proximity. Minor worlds wanted to be near a system where human ships patrolled. They're not asking for bases, Shakran explained to me. They're asking for cultural agreements, exchanges, minimal presence. They're seeking to be remembered, I responded. That night I walked through the city. I saw Baal Rashan children playing at simulating human and Corvan ship. Not as simple heroes and villains, as forces that collide, that calculate, that decide. I didn't know if that was progress or loss. Alessandro met with me once more privately. We didn't plan this, he told me. We never wanted to be an axis. But you are, I responded. Because you remember. He was silent. Then he spoke more quietly. Cale Thorne, there's something you must understand. On Earth, for a long time, no one came when we asked for help. We learned to survive alone, but we never forgot who did appear, even if only once. And now you pay that debt, I said. No, he corrected. Now we multiply it. There I saw the moral shadow. And if one day you're wrong, I asked, if you help someone who doesn't deserve it? Alessandro didn't respond immediately. Then we'll carry that, he said finally. Memory also weighs. I looked at the sky. The ships patrolled constantly, silently. The galaxy fears you, I told him. The galaxy observes us, he responded. There's a difference. I didn't know if there was, but I knew something with uncomfortable certainty. Humanity wasn't conquering territories, it was conquering the shared past of other worlds. And that was much harder to stop. Cycles passed before I understood what had truly changed. It wasn't the human bases in orbit, it wasn't the assembly's cautious silence, not even the visible retreat of the Corvins toward darker regions of the map. It was the way people looked at the sky again. Before, the firmament was promise, mystery, a place of commerce, ideas, diplomacy. Then it became a threat. And now it was something different. Responsibility. I found myself once more before the observation panels of the Supreme Council, in the same place where everything began. Lysara Central remained beautiful. The crystalline towers reflected light as always, but I was no longer the same Cale Thorn who observed with naivety. I didn't know if I was more exhausted or more awake. Confirmed report, Shakran said behind me. Corvin factions have halted their direct expansion. They're rearming, redefining doctrine. Learning, I responded. The general nodded. And observing the humans. Everyone is observing them. Earth hadn't proclaimed supremacy, didn't demand tributes or submission. However, entire systems adjusted their decisions based on a single question: what will humanity remember about us? That thought ran through the galaxy like a silent current. Alessandro Rivera met with me one last time before returning to Earth, not as captain, not as emissary, but as someone closing a circle. Our work here continues, he said, but it no longer depends only on us. Bail Rashan will never forget what you did, I responded. He looked at me with something close to sadness. That's what worries me and reassures me at the same time. I don't know if I understood everything, but I felt the weight of his words. Cale Thorn, he continued. When we answered your call, we didn't know what we'd gain. We only knew someone was about to lose everything. And now, I said, the entire galaxy is readjusting its moral balance. Alessandro smiled faintly. Not moral, practical. Morality changes as convenient. Memory doesn't. We remain silent. Do you think they'll ever stop needing to fight? I asked. He took time to respond. Maybe. But not while there are those who believe forgetting is a strategy. There was the final echo. Months later, we received a message that wasn't a plea for help, it was gratitude from a minor world, then another, then more. They weren't asking for fleets, they weren't asking for direct protection, they only wanted it recorded in human registers that when necessary, they had acted with dignity. They're planting, Shakran said. Not fear. Shared history. I observed the archives grow. Small acts, past decisions, help that seemed insignificant until someone remembered it. I understood then the true strength of Earth. Not their weaponry, not their doctrine, not even their ferocity. Their strength was simple and dangerous. Humans didn't forget who stood beside them when no one else appeared. And when the moment came, they returned not to collect with interest, but to balance a scale the galaxy had ignored for too long. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't sent that desperate transmission, if we'd accepted the Assembly's elegant silence, if we'd died correctly. I don't know the answer, but I know this: we called Earth when no one came. And when darkness reached our stars, they returned, not as saviors, not as gods, but as those who remember. Now I ask you, who listen to this story from a safe corner of the galaxy, if tomorrow Earth remembered your name, would it be to thank you? Because in this new universe we inhabit, that question has become the only one that truly matters. The galaxy learned something fundamental, something that changed the calculations of every empire, every council, every warlord plotting in the shadows. Memory is not weakness. Memory is currency. And humanity trades in a currency the rest of us had forgotten existed. The debt of presence when absence was easier. We built our civilization on reason, on the belief that logic would prevail, that diplomacy was armor enough. The humans showed us something we'd refused to see. Peace isn't the absence of war, It's the presence of someone willing to fight for it. I still stand at these windows, watching ships that don't belong to us patrol our skies. I still feel the discomfort, the gratitude, the fear, all mixed together. But I also feel something else, something I never expected. I feel witnessed. The galaxy knows our name now, not because we're powerful, not because we conquered, but because when we faced extinction, someone came. Someone remembered. And in remembering us, they changed what it means to be remembered. So I leave you with this final truth, the one that keeps me awake while others sleep peacefully under human-guarded stars. The most terrifying thing about humanity isn't their weapons, their tactics, or their willingness to sacrifice. It's that they turned kindness into strategy, and memory into power. They made the galaxy afraid not of what they'll do to enemies, but of what they'll do for friends. And now, every world must choose. Will you be remembered as the one who stood with them, or the one who didn't? Because in the end, that choice, more than any fleet or fortress, will determine who survives the next darkness that comes. The humans taught us that. They taught us that the most powerful weapon in the galaxy isn't technology. It's being the answer when someone calls into the void. It's being the ones who come back. This is Cale Thorne, liaison of Bail-Rashan, signing off. May you never need to make the call we made. But if you do, I hope someone remembers you the way Earth remembered us.